Good day, second years. I'm Dr. Anati, and I'm going to be doing the last chapter from my side, from child and adolescence stage, and we are going to be doing adolescence today, which is chapter 6. Okay, so the learning outcomes for this chapter: after completing this chapter, you will be knowledgeable about the following facets of adolescent development: the nature of adolescent, physical development, so how do they look in terms of height, size, just their general physical development, cognitive development. Remember when we were doing the middle childhood, we said one of the things that develops firstly in terms of their cognition is their frontal lobe. That's where their thinking, emotional regulation, planning, all those kinds of cognitive activities happen. And then personality development also continues to develop in adolescent stage, as well as their social development. Okay, so what is adolescence? It's a period of transition between childhood and adulthood. So we can say that it's a developmental bridge between being a child and being an adult. However, demarcating adolescence is not that easy, since the general characteristics of adolescence are not easily defined. I mean, we've got people or parents who believe that when they are reach adolescence, it's the stormy phase, they are very emotional, and it's just a whole roller coaster of emotions. So, for example, when you talk about the stormy phase, it's when some views characterize adolescent stage as the time where adolescents fight the most with their parents. There's a very big conflict between them and their parents and authority figures, really. So even at school, you find that they fight a lot with teachers, they fight a lot with their coaches. Sorry, if they're doing sports, and so it's characterized by, some people describe it as a stormy phase because of the conflict. And also there's just conflict even amongst themselves. They're very angry at their friends, that they don't want to be submissive to authority. And but some people, this is not a general view. So it's not a general view. Even in literature, it's not a general view, because there are some people who say they were very pleasant when they were adolescents. This conflict with everyone and just conflict with the world really never really existed with them. Okay, so some of the physical developments, learning content of this section: the nature of the physical development during adolescence, the growth spurt. So when adolescents, there's a difference between the boys and the girls. You find that there's just an exponential growth for both the boys and the girls in terms of their physical development. Some of the features: the girls starting to grow pubic hair, and the boys and breasts for girls, and just a broader shoulder for boys, and their voice starts to change, and they just look more manly. Men start to look more manly, and women also starts to have that shape, the feminine shape of being a woman. So the rapid growth spurt, although there are some similarities and some individual differences, generally for girls it's between age 10 to 13 they start to just drastically, rapidly grow in terms of their physical development, and it ends at 16 years old and sometimes later. While among boys it begins at around 12 to 15 years old, and it ends around 18 years old. And although the growth path begins at 2 years apart between the boys and the girls, they do sometimes generally meet up, and boys generally will grow taller and more masculine, obviously, because they are boys than girls, and then also depending on the genetic differences between the boys and the girls in terms of who gave birth to them, you may find sometimes the development is delayed. So it's not generally, doesn't start at 12, maybe it can start later at 15 for girls, and maybe later, and stop later also for boys as well. And then the sexual maturation is one of the most dramatic developments really in the human development. It's called puberty. And also, as in physical development, puberty for girls usually develops 2 years earlier than it does for boys. Okay, I'm just going to go through the table 6.1, the gender and age related changes at puberty or adolescence. So for boys and for girls, so characteristic the growth of testes and scrotal sac. The scrotal sac, I don't know how to explain it. You guys know what it is. And so at the age of the first appearance of the testes and the scrotal sac. Okay, and then the growth of the pubic hair. For boys, it's about 10 to 15 years, and for girls 9 to 14 years. I like remember for there's an age gap. The girls they generally develop faster than the boys. Growth of the penis from about 11 to 14 and a half. That's the start of their appearance. I'm not saying that the penis boys don't have penises when they are before the age of 11, but then the growth, the appearance of the growth, you see it from age 11 to 14 and a half. And for girls who don't have a penis, the manic for the girls, it's 10 to 15 years. And then the changes in the voice and arm hair, facial hair, and oil and sweat producing glands for girls, and then oil and producing sweat girls for boys is roughly the same age. I'm looking at the table 6.1 on your textbook. Okay, and then in terms of the psychological effects of physical changes, there's some general concerns when the average time or the expected time that a girl or a boy should start, there should be appearances in terms of the physical changes that mark adolescence. And when it doesn't happen, parents would usually seek medical consultations to see what's going on. For example, if a woman or a young girl has not started her period, then just to see if it's okay or if it's normal or what's happening, there would be concerns. And some of the other concerns is early or late maturation. So early and late maturation in boys is a concern. And also, I mean, if for example you've got a 7-year-old girl who starts her menstruation, you would be concerned because that would be considered as early maturation. Or if you have a boy at the age of 7 already starts to, you can see visibility in terms of the penis growth and the scrotum growth and the broadening of the, you would also be a little bit concerned because of the early maturation. Late maturation, it's exactly the same kinds of concerns. There are some cultural differences as well. So for example, not all ladies or not all young girls develop hips. There are some countries and some people, cultures that are more endowed to have that kind of shape, and some people, they just never develop it. And also just cultural beliefs and practices that happen to mark adolescence or to mark the development that we see in kids. Okay, and then body images and some eating disorder. We've got sometimes some of the early maturation or late maturations that can occurs because of sometimes there are complications that are self-induced, like eating disorders. They can stamper the growth, or they can manipulate the development of the body of of adolescents. So anorexia nervosa, where people and this happens to children, to young adults, adolescents. That's usually the onset, as well as as adults. So where people starve themselves, or they don't want to eat as little as possible. And when it happens, sometimes it's also affected by culture. So there was a client that I saw. It was a young girl. She was about 11 or 10 years old, and the way that the mom was speaking about her weight was a little bit big, that she's fat, and I've got a lot of problems related to health, to my weight, because I was also very much overweight as a teenager. And I mean, she was just so inappropriate, and you could just see that the child is anxious already about her eating habits. She already feels guilty for eating, that she's too young and she's too big for her age because she's eating too much. And the mom wanted her to starve the child, to starve herself and only eat salads. I mean, sometimes these kinds of disorders, eating disorders, can be induced or encouraged, or the onset is because of those kinds of comments that you get from your own environment. I mean, I had to really educate the woman because it came from a good place. She was experiencing health-related problems because of her weight, and she was naturally worried about her daughter, who was just 10 or 11. So I had to talk to her that, but you don't say it like this, because the way you are saying it, this child may develop eating disorders because she feels so heavily criticized by her own by her own mom. So you need to just, the way that you talk, your approach is very important. And right now, if you don't fix the approach that you are having with your child, you may cause problems. And then bulimia nervosa, some of the characteristics of that disorder is when people eat a lot. It's almost like binge eating, and then they throw up. Some of the features there with bulimia nervosa is people who throw up a lot. They will find that these glands by the neck, they've got also almost like a roundish. Oh, sorry about my lighting there. They almost got like a roundish face here because of the constant throwing up. So they eat, but they like to throw up immediately after eating, as a way of controlling the intake of the food and controlling their the fat and just calories that they get. The cultural differences here, again, we can see. I mean, if you look at the body shape of different people of the world, there are some cultures or some groups of people that are naturally, sometimes genes, they are naturally, their build is a little bit bigger, just because of their genes and because of the group that they are in. Whereas in some groups or in some cultures, the certain body shapes and body sizes are more encouraged than in others. Like I mentioned, some of the causes of these eating disorders, it could be the messages that people get from the time that they are children. The billboard, the media also plays a very major role in how we should be in terms of our body image, how we should look like, what size our body should be. I mean, we've got different complicated issues now. People doing tummy tucks because they want to look in a certain way, but they don't want to exercise. And I mean, people who have got money can do all these kinds of things because they want to look good and they want to look presentable. Okay, and then we talk about teenage pregnancy. We know in our country that teenage pregnancy is one of the biggest issues facing us, where teenagers, before they are even in grade 12, they fall pregnant or they impregnate young girls. And unfortunately for girls, they are the ones who carry the pregnancy, even though they don't impregnate themselves. But unfortunately, they are the ones who carry the pregnancy. They are the ones who sometimes have to drop school early because they have to take care of the child, and there's no one in the family who is in a position to take care of that child. And sometimes, because of the reason that the people who carry the burden of teenage pregnancy tend to be girls, or tend to be the family members of the girls, it's always advised, or the girls are the ones who are mostly cautioned about how to take better care of their bodies, how to make better decisions that will enable them to finish their studies, and so that they don't end up being young moms who don't have a bright future, and their children also not having a bright future. So some of the reasons for teenage pregnancy is because teenagers have sex early. They engage in early exposure to sex, early engagement. They are sexually active very, very early, and they don't have the reasoning ability, or they to just think things through, and to think about their futures and the futures of these children that they are carrying when they are so young. And they don't use protection. We can't say they're not informed, because I mean, as early as grade 8, if not earlier, children are taught about, I think even as early as grade 6, if not grade 5, where you are taught about sex education. So it's not that they don't know what's going to happen, because they are taught at school, and you would expect parents to have these conversations with their children. But if they don't, then you see people who engage in teenage, who are pregnant at a young age. In some countries and some cultures, teenage pregnancy may not be a huge phenomenon because of high rates of abortions, which are not done properly, which risk mainly these young girls' lives. So one of the reasons why most of the time sex education is hammered on the girls is because they are the ones who really do carry the repercussions. Some of the current statistics we saw this year, that over 600 girls between age 9 and I think 14, 600 were pregnant in the last year alone. That's a lot of young people. And you ask yourself, what's happening? Are they sleeping with their age mates, or are they sleeping with men who are way older than them? In that case, then it's rape. So those are some of the other reasons for teenage pregnancies. I mean, which 11-year-old girl consents to have sex? They're not even at the legal age that they should be having sex. So I mean, you ask yourself questions when you hear things like that. So the reasons for teenage pregnancy vary. It could be early exposure to sex, sometimes it's rape, sometimes it's just bad decisions that these young girls and these young boys that have no business having sex really, that they engage and they take in. Reasons for non-use of contraceptives, that also varies. There are some myths and cultural misconceptions that contraceptives make your breasts, these are some of the myths, they make the breast to sag for young girls. Sometimes this one isn't a myth though. Sometimes girls find that when they take some certain contraceptives, they gain a lot of weight. Others lose a lot of weight significantly, and these are some of the things that discourage girls from taking contraceptives. Boys, some of the reasons why they don't want to use condoms varies as well. Some of the myths are that the sex is better when there is no condom, raw sex is better, various misconceptions. So some of the reasons in the increase of pregnancy among black teenagers, again, I cannot say it's that they're not informed, because I mean, sex education really does start at a very, very early age, as early as grade 5. Sometimes it's just different reasons. Sometimes people engage in sexual activities. Alcohol and drugs are involved. Dating men who are way older, and sometimes it can be as a result of rape. The implications of teenage pregnancy, I mean, they are quite obvious. Sometimes girls have to stop going to school, and I say girls because they are the ones who carry the pregnancy, and sometimes we don't even know who fathered, or the fathers deny the pregnancy. And for DNA to take place, the child has to be carried through full term, and only after the child is born can a person do DNA. So you find that a lot of girls carry these pregnancies alone, especially in cases where they are denied and they don't have any support at all. And some of the consequences or the reasons is just high risk sexual behavior in this age group. Homosexuality, discovering of sexual orientation. So there's heterosexual relationships, which is relationships between a man and a woman. There's bisexual relationships where people feel like they fall in love with a person, and it could be a man, could be a woman. And then homosexual relationship, where it's the same sex, they are in love with each other, or they have got sexual relationship with each other. Some of the implications of homosexuality for adolescents. The stigma, there's still a lot of stigma in terms of homosexuality in South Africa. We still have people that get killed because they are homosexual. They are abused because of being homosexual. But more and more people are coming out, and more people are embracing their sexuality. Causes of homosexuality. I mean, some people are born homosexual. There is some research that tells us that there is a link, not necessarily a causal, but there's a link between early exposure to sex, sometimes being raped, and being homosexual. But some of these research are negligent. Most people, the average person, will tell you that they've always been attracted to the same sex sexually, and they've always known that they are different from the norm being heterosexual relationships. Okay. Okay, before we go to career choice, let's just go to the personality development, the theories of personality development. We're going to look at the temperament and personality traits. I'm going to ask you guys to go to page 340 on table 6.3, the change in the big five. You can't talk about personality without talking about the big five. It's a very big theory, the dimensions of temperament or personality during adolescence. So the big five consists of the extroversion, the negative emotional and neuroticism, agreeableness, effortful control and consciousness, and openness. Okay, so the development during adolescence, those who are the extroversion trait or the extroversion dimension, social dominance increases and shyness decreases. Other dimensions of extroversion and extroversions as a whole do not change. However, there is some evidence that extroversion increases for girls and decreases for boys, especially just at this stage. You find that girls are more extroverted, they are more outgoing, boys are more reserved, and they are more introverted. Negative emotionality and neuroticism. Findings are mixed here. Some studies suggest that neuroticism does not change, and others suggest that it does decrease. There's also some evidence that neuroticism may increase in young adolescent girls prior to the age of 14 compared to the boys. Agreeableness shows relatively little change during adolescence, although some evidence suggests it increases for girls. Yes, even in adults, girls are more agreeable than boys, whereas boys tend to be more independently thinking than girls, and want to make their own decisions than boys. Sorry. Effortful control and consciousness mainly appears to decrease, especially for older adolescents. This seems to be related to increased risk of taking opportunities. However, some studies indicate no change, while others indicate some increase. And then openness primarily increases in adolescents, but there are some evidence of change or even decreases. Okay, and then we go to the extroversion. So the table 6.4 outcomes correlates or temperament personality in adolescence. In terms of the extroversion dimension, remember it's introversion, extroversion. Extroversion is associated with high levels of externalizing behavior. There is mixed evidence for prediction of low academic achievement. However, extroversion is also associated with reduced risk of depression. And then negative emotionality and neuroticism. Irritability predicts high level of externalizing behavior. Agreeableness, low agreeableness is associated with early appearing persistence and severe forms of external behavior. Conscientiousness, self-regulation traits predict low levels of externalizing behavior and high levels of academic achievement. Openness, this is mixed evidence that openness predicts high levels of academic achievement. Okay, and then in terms of career choice, we're going to see how does that look like in adolescents. A Donald Tupper's life space approach. Look at the theoretical assumptions here. So if you look at the Tupper's lifespan approach to career development, the career development constructs, which is the self-concept, career maturity, adaptability, values, life roles, life themes, cultural context. So in terms of childhood, from 4 to 13 years old, the growth. Adolescent is, we're going to just look at the adolescent, 14 to 24 years old. The exploration. So during this time, kids are exploring, adolescents are the exploration stage. So they learn to integrate a real, ideal, and social self-concept. In terms of their career, that's their self-concept. In terms of their career maturity, they verify career choice by the subjects that they choose at school. Adaptability, they focus on own needs and identity. The values, the physical, social, and autonomous lifestyle. Life roles, they enjoy leisure, they learn new skills and life themes. They daydream a lot, test career, dreams in the real world. Cultural context, primary focus on peers, role models, depending on the subjects. Sometimes it also depends on the sports that they do. And if they are going to decide to be sports men and women, they are role models. And then John Hollard's theory of personality types. His theory was first published in 1950 or in the 1950s. It has been revised and updated 6 times. He distinguishes 6 basic personality types that fit certain career environments. The realistic personality type, which is R, the investigative personality type, the social personality type, the conventional personality type, the enterprising personality type, and the artistic personality types. So if you decide to be a psychologist or a psychometrist that deals in these types of John Hollard's theory of personality, there are some tests that will test if you are more realistic, more social, more artistic, more investigative, more conventional, or more enterprising. So one could expect that some you can be sometimes both. Sometimes someone can be three things. They can both be realistic, investigative, or artistic. It doesn't have to be just one social type that you have. In terms of social development, learning content for this section, the parent-adolescent relationship is very important in terms of the social development, the peer group relationships or relations, moral development. It's important to keep in mind that all aspects of adolescence development, that is physical, sexual, cognitive, personality, social, and moral development, occur within a social context. They don't occur in a vacuum that may either promote or hamper development. During adolescence, this social context is formed by parents, peers, and teachers, amongst others. So the parent-adolescent relationship, presently, a more balanced view is maintained by focusing on the attachment bonds between parents and adolescents and the support system that parents provide as adolescents enter a wider and more complex social environment. Within this context, conflict is regarded as normal facet of development. Yes, it's normal because it happens, because there's more that happens. They've got more responsibility in terms of their peers at school and their relationships with authority at school. So parents are supposed to be just more supportive, even though there's tend to be a lot of conflict between them and their adolescent children at home. The parent-adolescent conflict, when the subject of parent-adolescent relationship is raised, many people invariably picture conflict-ridden interactions between parents and child, but it's not always the case. There are some like I said earlier, there are some pleasant relationships, and not all adolescents are very stormy and just full of conflict. So the reasons for the changes in interaction pattern during early adolescence can be related to the biological changes during puberty, especially the hormonal changes that take place for both boys and girls, the cognitive changes which cause increasing questioning, idealism and argumentativeness, adolescent egocentrism, which is associated with their perception of their parents' attitudes towards them, the development of its own identity, which is associated with experimentation, social development, which implies an increase in independence, the onset of adolescence, which often overlaps with other facets. And then the peer group is important. So because adolescents have this heightened sense of wanting to belong, the peer group relationships are very important. They want to be friends. They want to feel like they belong to some sort of social setting. This increasing interaction with their peers as well as with friends provides interpersonal contact beyond the family relationships and play an important role in the adolescent psychosocial and psychological development. And then in terms of moral development, they learn through through romantic relationships what is right and what is acceptable socially and what is not acceptable. So in terms of the structure of the peer group, there's the peer acceptance, the peer rejection, the victimization, sometimes in terms of bullying that I spoke about earlier. But it is important for adolescents to have a sense of belonging. There's also the popularity versus loneliness. They want to be the popular ones. I don't know if it also happens, but you guys are not adolescents anyway. You are young adults. So the because of the need for the adolescents to want to belong, they may be victimized a lot, they may be bullied, and they may engage in activities that are not morally upright, that don't conform to the moral theories, and because they just want to belong, or they want to be popular, they don't want to be the lonely ones. And so they conform to socially accepted standards within that age group and within the social settings that they find themselves in. There's sometimes positive aspects of conformity where they conform to things that are very positive, negative aspects of conformity, parenting style, and conformity where they conform to their parents' expectations and the rules from the parents, and sometimes that's more positive than negative. Friendships, the nature of the friendship relationships during adolescence is very important. There are benefits to friendships, such as the sense of belonging. They learn how to socially interact with their peer groups. They learn some of the moral aspects that are good, moral codes, societal codes in the environment. The distancing effect between parents and the adolescents. Yes, sometimes at this age, because they are trying to learn to belong to groups, there may be some distancing between them and their parents. In terms of romantic relationship, sometimes the development stage is in heterosexual relationships, homosexual relationships as well. There's the positive and negative influences. Sometimes you find that parents, especially there are some studies that find that parents experience a lot of difficulty from their teenage children or adolescent children once they start forming romantic relationships. And then adolescents and cyberspace. Some of the risks associated with adolescents being in cyberspace is cyberbullying and them being exposed early to things that they're not supposed to be exposed to. So the early exposure to sexual context that is very explicit, or aggressive, or violence that is very violent, and just knowledge that is not criticized, and because they are still growing, they don't have the capacity to also just yeah, so some of the factors that influence moral development is cognition, personality of the child or the adolescent, the parents, the peer interactions, and the religion, schooling, the demographic environment, and some of the culture. Thank you guys. I'm done. I'm still encouraging you to email me if you need explanation of any of the content, and also just come say hi to the office and let's talk. Thank you.